Today, I finally get around to tackling a project that I've been putting off for almost 2 years, an attempt to build a set of stairs that will make it easier to get down this steep embankment on our property. And all of this while trying not to ruin my first ever concrete slab pour. Stay tuned. Believe it or not, the reason I put this project off for nearly 2 years is not because I'm lazy or don't enjoy building outdoor projects or even had better things to do. It's because I was dreading the thought of digging a bunch of holes and mixing a bunch of heavy, dirty bags of concrete by hand. But sometimes you have to do things you don't enjoy doing because it will ultimately get you to where you want to be in the long run. And for me, it's down to the lake so I can do some fishing. So here I am using primitive layout techniques, also known as wooden stakes, a little bit of string, and a measuring tape to lay out the location of 4 holes that will get filled with concrete, creating solid footers that we can then build a platform on. I'm not sure if it's like this where you live, but I always run into a lot of roots when digging holes, and having a set of garden shears close by really helps cut down the frustration. Alright, with the horrible dad joke out of the way and all the holes dug, I push these cardboard sono tubes into each hole to create a form for the concrete. Then I backfill each hole with a little bit of dirt to hold everything in place. These holes are getting filled with some high-strength Sackcrete concrete mix that I found at a local big box store. Now, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for my long-term health if I'm trying to stay positive, I'm not within 200 yards of a water spigot, which means I get to take this 5-gallon bucket up and down 50+ stairs to get lake water that I can mix with the concrete. And in case I wasn't clear before or you missed it, I absolutely dread mixing concrete. And when I do, I use an old garden rake and a shovel, thinking that in some way it will make life easier. But that's never the case. This just sucks. Once the tubes are filled to the top with concrete, which is about the consistency of peanut butter, I take out all my aggression on the concrete. I get the air bubbles out of the concrete using this old metal rod I found in the woods. Then, before everything cures, I line up these Simpson pour-in-place post brackets with my string lines, and I sink them into the concrete. These brackets will anchor our 4x4 post to each footer and keep the post just above the concrete so they will be less likely to rot. While that cures, I move on to making 3 stair stringers from some pressure-treated 2x12s. Now, there are a dozen ways and hundreds of videos that will help you figure out the rise and run for a set of stairs using the total height and distance divided by some sort of rocket science to get the final dimensions. And for this project, I'm going to throw all of that out the window. All of the other stairs that lead down to the lake have a rise of 7 inches and a run of 11 inches. So that's what I'm going to use for this project. To easily lay out and draw stair treads, I like to use this jig I made with some scrap wood. The triangle portion of the jig has a 7-inch rise and 11-inch run to match our stair. This triangle piece is screwed to another scrap board that will rest along the side of the 2x12. Then I just trace the jig with a pencil, move it down, lining up my previous line, and mark out all my cuts. But before cutting anything, I need to adjust the thickness of the bottom riser. Since this is the first step you're stepping up onto, you need to cut the thickness of the tread material off the bottom riser. In my case, it's 1 inch. So the bottom riser will be cut to 6 inches, but will be a total of 7 inches once the tread material is installed. With that complication out of the way, I can finally make the bulk of the cuts with a circular saw. Then, I finish off the corner portion of each tread with a handsaw. Since the appropriately named circular saw has a circular blade that cannot cut all the way into each corner. And once the first stringer is cut, it can be used as a stencil to mark the 2 remaining stringers. Each of these gets cut out the exact same way. I have a good reason, or at least a reason, for not doing a bunch of fancy calculations to determine the layout for my stair stringers. It's because I'm doing things backwards on this project. Plus, who wants to do math? So I'm actually going to use the stair stringer height to determine the height of my final platform instead of using my platform to determine the height of my stair stringer layout, if that makes any sense. But before I can start framing the platform, I need to get some 4x4 posts installed into the brackets now that the concrete has had time to cure. I like to get my posts roughly set where I want them and use a clamp to hold them in place while I take some measurements, check for square, and make sure that they are plumb. This post level comes in really handy because it allows you to plumb a post in 2 directions at the same time. There's a link down below for this and some other items I used on this project, and if you didn't know, those links help me out a little bit if you use them. So thanks in advance if you do. Once the posts are where I want them, I use some Simpson structural screws and lag screws to secure the bottom of each post to the brackets. Since I'm doing this backwards, to determine the height of the platform, I need to figure out where the top of my stair treads will land. That's the bottom line on this post. Then I measure up 7 inches, or the rise of one stair, and draw another line. This top line is where the top of our platform will need to be. Now, whenever I'm building a platform with stairs, I like to use a 2x10 or 2x12 rim joist as a header for the stair stringer to rest on. This just makes sure the stair stringers have plenty of support. The rest of the rim joist on this project will be 2x8s because there aren't any large spans here and it saves a few bucks and I'm cheap. Either way, all the outside rim joists are first screwed in place with some 3-inch deck screws, and once everything looks square and level and plumb, they are fully secured using some structural lag screws. With that complete, I need to add a couple of 2x6 joists on the inside of the 4x4 post that will support a breadboard edge when we install our final decking. I'm using 2x6s here just to save a little money. To install these, just take a quick measurement between the outer rim joist and cut your pieces to length and screw and bolt them into place. Oh, and one tip, if you're making cuts with a circular saw and a speed square, take your measurement and make your mark on the very edge of the board. There's no need to draw a line all the way across the board because you can line up your circular saw blade with your mark, then line up your speed square with your saw, and make the cut. This will save you lots of time in the long run. The last joist I need to install is a 2x8 down the center of this platform. This was slightly less than 16 inches on center for me, so I only need one. To ensure it stays perfectly flush on top with the outer rim joist, I simply hold it in place and screw it from the outside in with a couple of 3-inch deck screws. Then, once I have it positioned where I want it and it's flush on top, I go back and add my Simpson joist hanger. Then we can finish up the platform framing by adding some blocking. This blocking will serve 2 purposes. It will give the platform some extra rigidity, and the blocking on the edge gives the breadboard decking edge some extra support. The blocking is just screwed in place with some 3-inch deck screws. And with all that complete, I can finally get these stair stringers installed. I like using these metal Simpson stair brackets to install stringers. One side of the bracket gets attached to the 2x10 rim joist. I make a mark where I want the top of the stringer to land on the rim joist, then line up the top of the bracket with that mark before screwing it to the joist with structural screws. Then the bracket gets screwed to the side of the stringer with some more screws, and you only need to put 1 screw in the bottom. These brackets can be flipped around and installed either way, and I like to make sure that the bracket is on the inside of the outer stringers so they won't show. And one other note, even though I used a 2x10 rim joist here, I still needed to add a scrap of 2x6 to make sure the stair stringer was fully supported and provide a place to add all the required screws in the bracket. Now, some of you may have noticed that I didn't dig footers and install post brackets to support the bottom of the stairs, and the stair stringers are temporarily braced in place with some scrap wood. I decided to try something a little different this time. And as you will see here soon, this technique worked out really good and, in my opinion, made things much easier. But first, what I'm doing here is screwing the post bracket to the end of a 2x4 post that will support the bottom of the stairs. And here's the idea. I can then bolt this post with the bracket already installed directly to the bottom of the stringer where I want it. Then, once everything is screwed in place, I can pour the concrete slab up to the bracket in the bottom of the stair stringers instead of pouring the slab and resting the stair stringers on top of it. Let me know what you think about this technique in the comments down below. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be a YouTube concrete expert here. This will only be a very quick overview of what I did to pour this concrete slab at the bottom of my stairs. In all honesty, this is the first slab like this I have ever poured, so be nice in the comments down below, or go ahead and be a troll and roast me. But either way, I started out by building a form out of the cheapest 2x4 I could find, made sure everything was level, and used some stakes to hold it all in place. Then, reluctantly, I mixed, by hand, about 10 bags of concrete, one at a time, yes, using lake water, and filled up the form to the bottom of the stair stringers, making sure to pack the concrete in around the pre-installed brackets and underneath the stairs. And once everything was nice and filled up, I screeded everything flat with a scrap piece of 2x4. Now, when we built our home, there were a few leaves that fell into our basement slab, leaving leaf imprints in the concrete. My wife loves these, so I decided to press some leaves into the slab to spruce it up. Now, some of these turned out good and some were just okay. In the end, the wife is happy, so I am happy. Once the concrete had some time to set up, but before it was fully cured, I used this edging tool to round over all the outside edges of the slab so it looked like I knew what the heck I was doing. And that's it. That's what I did. With that curing, I installed some decking on the platform. I will show you how I installed all the decking on this project in more detail in just a minute, but first, I need to construct a walkway that will rest on top of this platform and span from the hillside to the platform. Now, the construction of this walkway started out the same way as the platform. I dug some holes, I filled them with concrete, and I installed some post brackets. However, I also had to bolt another 4x4 post to the platform. This post will support the walkway handrail later. Next, I added some 2x6 rim joist, bolted in some supporting joist for the breadboard edge, and ran another joist right down the middle. I finished up the framing by adding some blocking. You may notice that this walkway will have a slight slope, which I accounted for when I planned this project out. To install the 1x6 pressure treated deck boards, I'm using this Camo decking system. This system gives each deck board perfect spacing, and it is also a jig for the screws. This allows you to attach the deck boards with screws that are screwed in at an angle similar to a pocket hole. This basically hides the screws on the edge of the deck board, making them almost invisible. Now, this system is a little pricier than using nails or decking screws, but I really like the clean finish look they provide. I have also used these on other projects in the past, and they hold up really well. When I install the deck boards, I keep one side flush all the way down one edge and let the board overhang on the other side. This gives me the spacing I need for the breadboard edge and eliminates the need to cut the deck boards to length on one of the sides. The boards that are overhanging get cut to length once all the boards are screwed in place. I just used a chalk line to mark my cut and just took my time with the circular saw. Then I can add an edge board to each side, face screwing when necessary, giving this project a clean, finished, framed look. Now, there are a few spots where I need to trim deck boards around post. I like to start by holding the board in place. Then I mark where the post is located using a speed square. Next, I measure how deep the cut will need to be and mark the line. From there, I use my circular saw to cut each side to ensure it's straight, and finish up the remainder of the cut with a jigsaw. Also, notice how I keep these pieces a little bit long to allow for some wiggle room. And don't worry, these all get cut to their final length later once they are screwed in place. The last thing to do is add some railing so anyone who's been partying at the lake has a slightly better chance of making it up the stairs. You know who you are. Since these are just landscaping stairs, they won't have an elaborate railing system. You may want to check codes in your area to see what is permitted. Either way, I really like using these Decorator handrail brackets to install these simple wooden 2x4 rails. I start by clamping a 2x4 in place where I want the top of the handrail to go. Then I mark the 4x4 post on the top edge of the 2x4. This is where I'll cut it off for its final height. I also mark the 2x4 rail piece where it intersects the 4x4 post, so I know exactly how long and at which angle to cut it. This eliminates the need to measure anything, which, if you've been watching my videos for a while, I'm a huge fan of not measuring when given the chance. Then I just cut the 4x4 post to its final height and cut the 2x4 rail piece to length. Now, these brackets are 1/4 of an inch thick each, and one bracket goes on each end of the 2x4 rail piece. So you'll need to cut your 2x4 rail board 1/2 inch shorter in length to account for the thickness of the brackets. From there, it really couldn't be easier. Just slide the bracket onto the end of each 2x4 and secure it using 2 of the provided screws. Next, slide the rail piece in between the 4x4 post, making sure that everything is flush on top, and screw the bracket to each post with the remaining screws. The beauty of this system is that it can be used on flat horizontal rails or angled stair rails like this. Once those are all in place, I like to finish the top rail off by screwing another 2x4 over the top of the rail and the 4x4 post using some 3-inch decking screws. This also gives the rail some extra strength, and it really couldn't be easier. All that hole digging and concrete mixing paid off because I can finally realize my dream of going down to the lake with all my fishing gear without having to climb down these sketchy, muddy stairs made from a few old logs. Just remember, you can realize your dream too and DIY, build it yourself. Oh, and one last thing. YouTube is convinced you're going to like this video that just popped up on your screen as much as you like this one, so go ahead and click it and I will see you over there for the next project. And I really do mean it when I say thanks for watching.